Terminate the Turtles. Here's your look at the new NECA toys, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, Baxter, Stockman. From the Turtles in Time video game, NECA presents the Baxter Stockman figure. This figure features a paint deco that recreates the pixelated look from the video game and includes posable wings, hinged jaw, ray guns, and an articulated energy hand that can snatch the turtles. Cover up your garbage cans before we get a closer look at the Turtles in Time Baxter Stockman. Obviously, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. While I'm doing this, I'd like to thank the folks over at NECA Toys that provide the sample of Turtles in Time Baxter Stockman that we could have a look at in this review. Taking it, like I said, to the very top of his head. Stop it right there. According to the readouts, Baxter Stockman from the Turtles in Time video game stands 6.3 inches in height. Switching that quickly over to centimeters, the figure stands, lo and behold, 16 centimeters exactly. And we'll get going with some size comparisons. I don't have a Turtles in Time turtle right at the present, but I do have a regular turtle. We're going to bring in Raphael so you can see how Baxter Stockman stacks up next to him. Because after all, the Turtles in Time turtles would simply just be reusing these molds anyway, so it kind of gives you a good idea. And I'm sure also you guys would want to see how he looks next to the cartoon Baxter Stockman. Quite a big jump in height. You know, looking at all these figures standing together like this, almost like they're all good friends, I can't help but think that the Turtles in Time Baxter Stockman is a little tad tall. In the game, he's roughly about the same height as a regular turtle, and of course, if the Turtles in Time turtles are just reusing the molds from the original releases, I feel like Baxter Stockman probably could have been maybe to about right here. I don't think it's the torso necessarily. It's probably the fact he has just really, really long legs. And I probably would have shortened those just a little bit. What you'll see to your left are the accessories that come included with Baxter Stockman. What you'll see to the right is a couple of display stands to help display the figure and his big giant hand. No, not the hands that are in his forearms. The big giant hand. Yeah, you can see it. It's right there. Yeah, it's right there. You know, the fact that these flying characters really, of course, translate better when in a collection when you actually have them flying. Short of you actually just finding a display stand that could accommodate that, or just using the simpler route, I suppose, of just using fishing line. Yeah, you would want to have Baxter Stockman, a character like this. After all, in the level, most of the time he's flying until he gets down on the ground for some ground and pound. But it's nice to see that NECA Toys would have included a display stand with the figure. We have seen these display stands sold before, though sold usually separately. But we'll have a look at it. It's basically a big, giant, clear stand with a rather large adjustable neck. This whole back section can be brought up and down, and you can see hits a series of ratcheted train tracks. Choo, choo, choo. It does at least guarantee that this locks in place, and I do like that. Generally, I think when it comes to displaying this along with the Turtles in Time turtles, I probably would bring it down a few notches, just so Baxter Stockman is a little bit closer for the turtles to swing at. From there, this actually has a couple of knuckle joints that you can adjust. There's one right there. That's just, there we go. And there's one right there at the end as well. I did end up having to go in there and just tighten it a little bit with my screwdriver just to ensure that those screws were nice and tight. And then the very end of it, there's a waist clip that attaches around the figure. The only critique I could really make about the display stand is if you look at the very end of it, it seems to be 6 sides, right? It seems like it's 6 sides. But the side, the very top of it, isn't a flat part. It's angled. So when it comes to putting on the waist clip, you're always sort of putting it on an angle. It never sits dead straight. You can try your best to put it on, rotating it different ways, but it's always going to be sitting on an angle. So your Baxter Stockman isn't necessarily going to be standing upright. He's always sort of be leaning off to the side. Let's go ahead and pick up the figure here. And basically all you're going to do is just going to open up the waist clip here, clamp it securely around his waist, and then close up shop after that. Now, short of you actually doing it in a much more interesting pose than what I've got it right now, it just looks like he's been picked up, a little small child being picked up by his parents. But at least it gives you the option to display him in a flight pose. And I think it's really clever the fact that they included it along with the figure. Looking at the other things he comes included with, he comes with his laser shooting Uzi. Sort of what he starts with at the beginning before he moves on to that big giant energy glue hand. Similar to the Baxter Stockman that we'll be looking at closely in a second, it does have that pixelated look. Starts off gray, and then adds some darker gray and some additional black accented along the top. It can fit easily into his hands, and don't worry, he does come with some swappable hands to accommodate that. Speaking of big giant energy hands, of course, in order to do that, he comes with this kind of looks like a cap gun. Although it's not firing off a big giant flag that says BAM, instead it's shooting off a big giant hand. But again, similar to that laser shooting Uzi, it does have some little square pigments of different colors, just breaking it up a little bit, making it look more closer to its video game counterpart. Let's talk big giant hands. He comes with not only a big giant hand, but a big heavy hand as well. The term heavy-handed, I'm sure, would refer to this, because it's all of weighted plastic. There's nothing hollow about this at all. There is some posability, so technically you can rotate the outer hand, the main grabbing parts of the hand. You can at least rotate that. Kind of looks like a little bit like a graboid from the Tremors movie. It does have, again, that pixelated yellow added to it as well, just to break it up a little bit so it's not just all straight white. What you can do is, I'm going to want to set up shop accordingly. We're going to get the Uzi. Actually, no, we're going to grab the other gun, put that into his hand like that, and then get that just straight enough, because then you're going to make use of this display stand. Now, Baxter Stockman does lift, but not nearly enough to the point where he'd be able to hold this on his own. So this display stand comes then rather handy, because you just clamp this onto the end, like that. And then when that's standing upright, it basically can stand really on its own. You just connect the two. You just rotate the hand up, make sure you got it at the right angle, and then from there, you're going to bring this around and you're going to attach it into the cap gun. I keep calling it a cap gun, but it's the closest thing I can compare it to. And at least it really gives you a way to balance off that weight. Because really, under the circumstances of the way the figure is holding a gun like this, it would be impossible, dare I say, impossible for him to actually be able to hold a hand this size and this weight. So again, I like the fact that they include a display stand like this, so you can effectively pull that off, similar to the same weapon that he uses in the game. And as for the energy hand, in case you are curious, you can take yourself a random unsuspecting turtle, and it clamps just around his waist, well, kind of around his shell. You can get it to the point where he actually suspends, though the weight is going to be increased, but you can at least actually have him holding a turtle in his hand. It's kind of strange to see him doing that, but that's really neat, the fact that you can actually pull that off. Other accessories to come include with the figure, he comes with a series of interchangeable hands, one of which happen to be a pair of closed fists. Generally, I do fault closed fists in the past whenever I look at figures, because I just think, who's going to display a figure with closed fists? But technically, in a case like Baxter Stockman, I'm probably not going to display him with both guns in hand. I think that's a little overboard. So probably in a case like that, I would display him with either relaxed hands or closed fists. In a case like this, I appreciate the fact that they include closed fists with the figure. He also comes with a pair of relaxed hands and a pair of grabbing hands. I just so happen to have used one of each when it comes to displaying with the figure. One relaxed hand on the one side, one grabbing hand or gripping hand on the other. You can see the difference between the two. In both cases, painted a very nice shade of almost a very dark pink. And he does have fingernails that they've sculpted in place as well. And those look really nice. As I said, though, I've already taken the liberty of popping one of them off and replacing with the opposite hand. So right now, sporting with the figure, I've got a relaxed hand on the one side and a grabbing hand on the other for him holding his gun. Now we can have a closer look at the figure itself. Baxter Stockman pulled, of course, from the video game Turtles in Time, a personal favorite of mine. I think the detailing on this guy is really good. And really, when you're looking at him, I'm going to move him over just for a second and bring in, obviously, the only other comparison I think would be valid in a case like this. Bring in the cartoon Baxter Stockman. I would have a real tough time, I think, trying to pinpoint anything that they would have used from one figure to the other. Even, obviously, his feet. His feet are a different size altogether. So they would have had to sculpt from scratch, in both cases, Baxter Stockman and the video game counterpart version of him. Let's talk a little bit again about the height issues. I feel like the figure is a little on the tall side. I don't think that Baxter Stockman should be the size that he is from the cartoon, because he's way too small when you compare him to a regular turtle figure. However, though, I'm going to move this one off to the side for the time being, and we'll bring in just Raphael, just for the time being. When you see the two stacked next to one another, and then you remember how they fought in the video game, Baxter Stockman was actually about the same height as a turtle, which then results in having him all this excess length when it comes to his leg. Now, you can kind of work around that by bringing the legs forward, just bending the knees a little bit, and doing the exact same thing on the other side. What we're basically doing is we're just shortening the height of him, just like that. And when you bend those knees, you're going to be bringing him a little bit closer to the size of a regular turtle. But I think in a case like this, I would have even taken one step further, and I would have probably reduced the length of his thighs. I think his thighs, as well as his lower legs, are way too long, and if they had shortened that up a little bit, I think he would be scaled a little bit more appropriately to one of the regular Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures that we've looked at before. Despite that, though, it's actually a great-looking head sculpt. It does have an open and closing mouth, so if you want to have that displayed with the mouth open, it does then give an opportunity to see some nice sculpted tongue on the inside of his mouth. He does have the beady eyes. Of course, he's got big pixelated squares in the centers of those. And the coloring on this is very vibrant and rich. Of course, when you look at the coloring, he's got the V-neck sweater here. Pixelated. I mean, pixelated will be the best way to describe this figure through the course of this review. Colors, the way that they applied it, are done in a square, blocky fashion. So the whole back section of him, for example, will have a darker purple coloring and then get a lighter color. There's no real transitioning happening here. It's stark. Stops right there, and it stops in such a way that you got sort of this zigzag kind of patterning that they've done. That looks really nice. You either will be interested in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle in Time figures by the way that they're colored, or you're not going to be. I personally like the idea of the pixelated look because it reminds me more of the video game. But we spin the figure around here so you can see it on the back. He does have wings, not the same wings that were with the regular Baxter Stockman. Again, we just reach off to the side. You can bring in the other one so we can see. Definitely brand new sculpted wings in this case. They're not fully, well, they're somewhat translucent. As you can see, it's got a real soft pink color that they've applied to it. And actually, when you see it up close and personal, it seems almost like there's a bit of a glitter speckling that they've done to the plastic. I really like how the way that turned out. On the back of the figure, this is the one thing I thought would have been the same from one figure to the other, was his arms. And not even then is that the case. The fly arms are clearly longer, and the pincers on the end are also a larger size as well. So in a case from one Baxter to the other, there's nothing at all that has been used from one figure to the other, at least nothing that I can see. I thought maybe, if anything, it could have been the shoulder, but the shoulder also seems to be a longer piece. So NECA looks like they've pulled this straight from scratched, brand new molding. And that's really impressive, the fact that they've done that. Again, I'm really liking the look of the figure. My only real critique would be the fact that I feel the figure is way too long. Shorten out his legs a little bit, make him a little bit shorter and squatter the way he looks in the video game. I probably would keep the torso about the same length as what it is right now. I don't think I would do too much to disrupt the sizing of the torso. Maybe shorten his neck a little bit. But I really like the look of Baxter Stockman here. I'm really having a tough time actually coming up with which one is my favorite of the two. The other one, of course, is pulled more from the cartoon. This one's pulled more from the video game. But I really like the bright colors that this one brings to the table. Buzz, buzz. Let's get a closer look, buzz, buzz, at the articulation on Turtles in Time Baxter Stockman. So what he has is he has a ball joint. You can rotate the head all the way around. It hinges quite a nice angle up, down. You can also rock it back and forth as well. We've already looked at the fact he does have an open and closed mouth, and that's a nice little touch on NECA's part. But in addition to that, Baxter Stockman also has a hinge at the base of his neck. That then means you can then bring the neck forward and back just a little bit. It's a little on the tighter side on this figure, but I would again appreciate a tighter joint on figures in super loose joints. You see the hinge joint right there. As for his arms hinge out almost at a 90-degree angle bend. It creaks and squeaks the further you get to that 90 degrees, so I'm more comfortable to sit him at around a 45 instead. You can, of course, bring the arms forward and back. Again, a little on the tight side, but that's okay. Has a double hinge on the elbow, and then he has articulation in the hands where you can rotate them all the way around and also hinge them back and forth. How about that? Now, his upper torso is interesting. His torso, if you were to pinch an inch, and even then some, you'll see quite a bit of it goes in. It seems like he does have articulation, probably an ab crunch underneath this, but it's covered in a softer overlaid plastic. Like I said, you can pinch an inch. He does have waist swivel, which again is part of the articulation. Actually, you know what? You can kind of lift it up a little bit to see what's going on inside. I don't know if you can actually make that out or not. I can. That they have actually sculpted pink plastic underneath, showing a little bit of that fly tummy underneath it. I like that. His legs hinge out. This one leg is a little on the loose side. The legs can move also forward and back. He has a double hinge on the knee. And then when it comes to, of course, his feet, the feet move back and forth this way. And you can also ankle pivot those as well, those big giant fly feet. And just in case you're curious, he does have peg holes on the undersides of his feet, so he doesn't necessarily need to use that display stand unless you want to put him in a flight pose. I think the virtue that he does have that additional big energy hand, I think I'd be more inclined to probably display the figure on a traditional NECA stand and then just display him with that big giant hand gun. I see what I did there. Hand gun. I made a little bit of space, freed it up next to him, so we can again bring in the cartoon version of Baxter Stockman. Sort of pick your poison, which one you prefer of the two. Both bring different things to the table. If you like the cartoon version of Baxter Stockman, then yes, you're probably going to be gravitating a little bit more towards that one. But I like the fact that NECA Toys gives us options. If you're a big fan of the Turtles in Time video game like I am, then yeah, absolutely, I would want to add a Turtles in Time Baxter Stockman to my collection. And what we get here, though, is a nice-looking version of Baxter Stockman. A little on the tall side, mind you, but a still nice-looking figure nonetheless. A lot of new stuff went into NECA's release of the Turtles in Time Baxter Stockman. I just assumed it was probably going to be using a lot of the molds from the original cartoon Baxter Stockman, but even if you look at his V-neck sweater, it's sculpted differently. Now, it's not to say that they didn't just use that mold and just tool it slightly different. The V-neck opening is a little bit different than the cartoon version, and the bow tie is also a little bit different. But for the rest of his body, the longer limbs that this one is sporting, I was trying to really think of if they're going to use this for something else, or if they have already. Perhaps maybe the legs were used from the Vernon that we looked at not too long ago, and in just a case, again, they already have the mold. Just probably was a case that they just retooled it slightly, adding the rips and tears and stuff on the bottom of the legs. What we end up getting, though, is a Baxter Stockman here pulled from the video game, though slightly longer proportions. It's about the only thing I would say I would have changed differently on the figures, would made him a little bit more shorter and squatter. Maybe not to the size that the animated Baxter Stockman was, because that figure would have been way too short, but maybe a compromise somewhere in between, keeping the same body proportions at least from the waist up, and just shortening the limbs from the waist down, giving him slightly more stockier legs. But I do like the color scheme for this guy. He has some really nice accessories. And the fact that they included the big energy hand that I always thought looked like a big giant glue hand is also a nice touch on NECA's part to also include a display stand to properly hold that hand, because there's no way you'd be able to hold that upright like that. Just overall, a really fun looking figure. Looking forward to putting it on display with the rest of my Turtles in Time releases. A big thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys that provided the sample of Turtles in Time Baxter Stockman that we could have a look at in this review. Have you picked up the figure for yourself? If so, or if not, what do you guys think of it based on this review? If you have picked it up, obviously let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of it. And make sure, yes, that you're coming back to this channel regularly, because we are going to be looking at some more NECA Turtle releases. The key, though, and making sure that you're not missing a beat, is that you're hitting the subscribe button down below, that you're turning on the bell notification, and that, yes, you're coming back to this channel regularly, because like I said, we are going to be looking at some more NECA Turtle releases, and we are also going to be looking at some more NECA releases as well. Yay. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.